Welcome to Worship with Christ Church of Fort Thomas, Kentucky. My name is Edward Good, and I'm pastor here. Just a reminder, these are just some short reflections we're doing on the Beatitudes while I'm on vacation, actually, right now. Our in-person pulpit supply folks weren't able to get things recorded ahead of time, which is totally fine. But I wanted to continue to be able to have these reflections online to keep the consistency of the series, especially for those who just participate with this in our online offerings. So we are finishing up today the last of what we know as the Beatitudes, these series of blessed R's that Jesus starts out, begins the Sermon on the Mount with. So we've been looking at about 2 of those each week, and we come to the final ones, which is actually kind of 3 of them together. And the final one, so from verses 9 through verses 9 through 12. And it is the ones that, especially the last parts, the last 2, that really are the ones that don't generally show up too often. Like you see like a cross stitch that someone's made, like a blessing gift that someone gives about the Beatitudes. These are the ones that don't necessarily show up like that. So you'll see what I mean if you're not familiar with them. But take a listen as we begin that, and then I'll share a reflection about these words. So again, Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. As many of you know, I am a photographer in addition to being a pastor. And one of the things that I absolutely adore are, especially mornings, when I find a lake, whether it's one that's right near my house here that I often go about to, or where I'm actually coming home from on vacation as you may be taking this in, a mountain lake that is perfectly still or very, very still and calm, where it's almost like you're looking at a mirror and seeing the reflection of the hills or the mountains or the clouds or the sunrise or whatever it is that's around there. I adore those kind of moments. I love the peace and the stillness of those places. And it's those kind of things that I often feel like we think of when we hear something like, blessed are the peacemakers, or that we are seeking to bring about peace in the world. Because I think our temptation about the word peace is to think that it just simply means the absence of conflict, that it means the absence of waves, of ripples, that things are steady and smooth, and there's nothing that kind of ruffles, stirs the waters, so to speak. But these last several Beatitudes, I think, are really all connected to one another. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. And blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Now, it may sound weird to hear that those are all connected, but I believe that they are when you think about the meaning, the biblical meaning of peace. Because the word peace, that is probably at the heart of what Jesus would have been saying. Now, Jesus wasn't speaking, even though the New Testament is written in Greek, Jesus was probably not speaking in Greek. Jesus was probably speaking either in Aramaic or in Hebrew. And Jesus would have been raised speaking and understanding the Hebrew scriptures, where the word peace is the Hebrew word shalom, which is a word that has a lot more meaning than just something that's still and calm. It isn't a word that means an absence of conflict, but instead it refers to the restoration of how things are supposed to be. You see, the Hebrew mindset recognized, the worldview of the Hebrews of the day, recognized the world was not as it should be, or as God desired it to be. It's a different concept than what Christians often refer to as original sin. It is a different concept to that, but that the world is not what it's supposed to be. And that one of God's desires is to bring about shalom, which was the restoration of all things. Another phrase that sometimes is used in Hebrew is about the repairing of the world. And you might hear it called, in the Hebrew phrasing, tikkun olam. But at the heart of it is this word shalom. And the word shalom, again, is this restoration of all things. But that is a word that implies that sometimes that still waters, those peaceful, reflective still waters, sometimes need to get stirred up a bit. That sometimes you need to kind of make some waves in order to bring about shalom. Because part of bringing about shalom might be breaking down things that oppress. It might be setting people free that some don't want to be set free. It might be changing systems that are not as God desires them to be in this world. And when people start troubling the waters, that's when people in power get a little uncomfortable. The late civil rights leader and Congressman John Lewis used to talk about how it was important for people of faith and people of conscience to get into good trouble. Not bad trouble, good trouble. That sometimes you need to go and stir the waters and make some ripples and make some waves in order for God's work to be done. And when you read in the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures, the prophets, the ones they weren't just speaking about like future things. They were speaking words of truth to the leaders of the day, and not just the leaders outside of the Hebrew community, but to the Hebrew community themselves. They were people who were speaking truth to power and saying things need to be changed to get in line with what God desires for this world. And they stirred up good trouble. And sometimes their words were accepted and changes happened. And sometimes they were persecuted. They were shalom makers, but they were persecuted. They were attacked. And some of them lost their lives because of stirring that good trouble. One of our writers for these chapters in our guidebook talked about how you can't be a Christian if you're not causing a little bit of problems, you're not causing a little bit of conflict. And I don't think we as Christians should be going out just to cause problems, but we as followers of Jesus need to follow the example of Jesus, who did go and stir up the waters, who did go and cause some good trouble. In his work to try to bring about God's shalom for the world, Jesus caused some good trouble. And he was persecuted for it. He was reviled for it. And he was killed for it. And that may be hard for many of us, because I can say for me as a Christian, it's been a very easy thing to be a Christian in my life. It's a safe place in America to be a Christian. That's not the case all over the world. And it's also not the case when we as followers of Christ do speak truth to power, even in our own country, about policies, about systems, and about things that are not as God desires them to be. As we speak up for God's love, compassion, truth in the world, sometimes it's not always going to be well received. But that's the work that we are called to. And when we do that, it talks about blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be called children of God. That is that sense that what people will see in us is they will see God in us. That when we're persecuted, we're going to see, yes, the kingdom of heaven at work. And even if we're reviled like the prophets before us, to know that we're in good company. So the Beatitudes end on a challenging note. They don't end on a warm fuzzy. They end on a challenging note, which is Jesus laying it out. That what the Sermon on the Mount about what this way of Jesus is a way that's going to change things up. And it's going to stir the waters in order to bring about God's peace and God's shalom. Grace, peace, love, and joy be with you this day and every day. Amen.